Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to welcome you to the reading and debut of the 2023 Ellipsis Journal. Ellipsis is both a nationally and internationally recognized literary journal published by the students of Westminster College. In 2022, it won the Association of Writers in Writing Programs Award for Outstanding Undergraduate Journal. Now, I might be biased because I've had the opportunity to work alongside these students, but we have quite an impressive and dedicated team. And we have all worked very hard throughout the academic year to read, discuss, and ultimately select the pieces we feel best suited the journal this year. Each year we receive around 2,000 submissions, so this is no small task, but thanks to Ron John, we never felt as though we had bitten off more than we could chew. You'll now have the opportunity to get to know the faces of our Ellipsis team, as each member will be reading a portion of a selection from Ellipsis. We'll now welcome our first reader to the stage.
Hi, I'm Megan Wade. I'm going to be reading the poem Snapshot by Tiffany Aurelia. So this is how becoming a ghost feels. Bodies of still streamed water fitting into my palms because I've spent too long rubbing sun rays like stars strung around sand-glazed skin. Somewhere, tide song is flickering against shore. 2 hands of a clock caught at standstill, balanced, even if only briefly. I search through the clouds for a hawk and dig across the sand for sea goods, my backpack weighed down by the twilight smoke shells I collected hours before, on another beach, in a different memory. The murmuring sky reminds me I was here, braiding algae with my legs and trading songs with the passing ducks, their bills a cavalcade of rustling branches, all of us melting and moving amongst the water space of time. Veiled by salty heat, my wave-baked body is metamorphosed into this summertime self. Is this the forever in which we are suspended to still life? I wade barefoot between the rocks and pretend that memories are not memorials, but an undying river of forevers, of sticky midsummer horizons and lakes that weave our footprints into the memory of its eternal keeping. I want to return, but this beach is too far to swim. The current pushes me forward, and I am incessantly flowing in the waters between then, between now, and the eternity afterward.
Hello, I'm Jackie McNamara, and I will be reading an excerpt from If Serendipity Could Stretch the Earth Like Taffy, by Lucy Jane. Alice sold serendipity in test tubes sealed with rubber stops, snug in metal racks that clattered against the glass if you so much as walked by them. After Mom died, I visited Alice's store with all my savings and cashed-out investments and asked her what I could afford. She stared at the scrap sheet of paper I presented, scrawled with different levels of affordability. My current cash plus depleted 401k. My current cash plus depleted 401k plus the maximum amount of debt I was willing to take to afford a bottle. Alice shook her head. Even with the best possible loan a bank would be willing to give you, it wouldn't be enough. She suggested I find a therapist instead. I said, fuck therapy, because therapy was for dimwits who failed to understand themselves, and I understood myself very well. I needed a bottle of serendipity, not a conversation about my feelings. I left her store $50 poorer for her consultation. Instead of returning home, I walked further down the alley, past Alice's shop and into the more dusty, littered streets that sold knockoff clothing and odd groceries like snapping turtles and fertilized duck eggs. Mom often frequented this area because she'd rather donate an organ than pay for the produce sold at our local Kroger and Sprouts. Even our grocery bargain outlet triggered her penny-pinching 5th sense, so she'd stuff a bag full of plastic bags from previous shopping trips, disappear down the alley, and return home with armfuls of Napa cabbages and sealed plastic-wrapped organ meats. The groceries dwarfed her body. I was surprised she didn't topple. She refused to let me accompany her because she said the area was dangerous, full of bad people. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brooke Scudder, and I will be reading The Distance Between Mountains by Lane Cunningham. After Roman booted out the last customer and locked the diner's front entrance, he thought of the dolmen where he'd played as a child. The ancient stone structures dotted the Caucasus, and he'd discovered no one knew about deep in the forest near his village. His older brothers had been too busy to explore his find. One traded the family's harvest of potatoes and hazelnuts for shovels and buckets and second-hand clothes. The other brother sold every scrap at the regional market. Both men died in the war. Lately, Roman's son, now 11 and eager to enter the world of men, had been asking about the uncles he would never meet. Caden knew they'd lived in a 2-room stone house and at night shared a bed and a bear fur blanket. He knew that when storms had piled snow against the windows, they'd slogged through the drifts to their grandmother's cottage to check on her. Of the other things, the Battle of Sukhumi, the fall of Gagra, the exodus from Oak Kanchira, and all that happened in between, his son knew nothing. Instead, Roman fed him stories about tracking Tur across the shattered mountains. The antelope were rangy and shy, and he'd carved the horns of his first kill into cups. His daughter Maisie was too young to understand that hunting put meat on the table, so he described the wool coats with cape-like sleeves village women had worn on special occasions. After hearing about the old rock house near Augusta, he'd run the kids out there to give them an idea of how he'd grown up. Then he'd brought them home to a wood and vinyl box that rotted a little every day. He'd built a playhouse that summer using stones dredged from the driveway. Whenever he heard their laughter, he believed in the man he'd become. Thank you.
This poem's by me, so. Make the cut. My yard is full of lions, yellow buds that bleed white, a layer of snow in the 90-degree heat. I pay no heed to my neighbor's close-cut lawn or the way the grass pricks my heels. Crawling between my toes, the sharp scent stings. My feet dance where stems weep. But I know you will say we have to let it go, that to grow we must cut ourselves back, trim the edges, pull the lions from each wedge. No matter my plea to let the jungle be, you see the weeds as weeds. I'll pull back as you push the mower through tall green stalks, severing my lions' heads, razor blades biting blades of grass, both sides roaring. Your sweat, my tears, years of overgrowth that you slice through inch by inch. I dread the day you come home. Until then, I'll let the lions grow. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Scott Sweeney, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from the short story Nibbles. I scurry towards the hallway, then creep towards the top of the staircase. All clear and no present danger. Slowly and carefully, I trudge along before dropping down each step. Pitter-patter-fa-thud, 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 until I finally reach the landing and behold my destination, Jack's Entertainment Center. Showtime. This baby is filled with every kind of electronic goodie any grown-ass man-child would love. It's got all the gaming consoles available, several games, a decked-out sound system, and a flat-screen TV nearly the size of the wall it's mounted on. I excitedly charge over to the large wooden cabinet and nearly slam face-first into it. Okay. Wait. How am I going to get inside? I can't exactly rock climb smooth wood. Shit. I didn't think this part through. I feverishly search the room for anything, or for something, anything I can get my claws on fast. I nearly stumbled backwards over a black cord. I looked down at this ordinary piece of plastic tubing, nearly squealing with delight. This is too easy, yet deliciously perfect. I take part of the black cord in my hands and begin chewing away as if I were in a pie-eating contest. Nom, 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 I chew away, relishing in the Turkish delight, which is sweet revenge. This will cost him hundreds of dollars. Ha ha ha. Nom 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 nom. Bzz, zap, Bzz, bzz, zap, zap. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Madison Hill, and I'm going to be reading Mango in Between Your Teeth by Isabel Isaac. Avadi summer sits too snugly under my arms and between my sticky fingers and on top of the stone steps where Auntie sits, peeling golden mangoes under the shadows of coconut trees. We watch the woman across the street bent over her morning rangoli. Auntie, I say, pointing. The colors, they're like your mango. Auntie throws her head back in throaty laughter, missing teeth on full display, as rainbow-shaded mango peels slip from her lap and onto her bare feet. Yes, Shalom, she says, handing me another slice. They're like my mango. She sticks the seed between her grin and sucks juice from its sweet fuzz, lips spreading into a sugary smile.
Hi, my name is Irma Hrkovic, and I will be reading an excerpt from The Evergreen Beast by Chloe McConnell. When Rory found the Adirondack Monsters Guide in a rack of booklets at a Stewart's gas station, he bought it both as a joke and as a precautionary guide for the post-graduation 5-day hike across the mountain range with Thomason and Marie. Bear-like, with a pelt made of pine needles and teeth the size of a child's forearm, Rory read. He was sitting cross-legged in the grass in front of a previous camper's fire pit. The Evergreen Beast is a monster of malice and intelligence. It attacks in threat order. If some forest creature comes for us, I'll just punch it. These arms are lethal weapons, Thomason said, as she applied sunscreen to her already red shoulders. Like Rory, Thomason was both white and pale, making sun-soaking a risk to their comfort and long-term health. That never stopped her from forgetting to reapply, though. Marie was a bit better off, still white, but faring much better in the sun during the long days of hiking. She attributed this to an Italian grandmother. You can't punch a monster, Tommy. Marie watched her girlfriend rub the lotion into the sunburn. Negativity won't protect us, babe. My immense strength will. 1,000 pounds and glowing eyes. Smells like rotten fish. Rory flipped the page of the booklet and pretended to continue reading. Could easily take out Thomas and Burke. Eats Thomas and Burke for breakfast with a side of, get off your ass, Rory. Help out, Thomason said. Lentils. He rolled up the booklet and stuffed it in his pants pocket. There wasn't that much for him to get off his ass to do, really. Not a sleeping bag or a backpack or even a water canteen. Everything they normally had was gone. The things that had accompanied them for the last 4 days were nowhere that he could see. He realized they didn't have their tents and wondered where they had gone. Left behind. Where?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ranjan Adiga, faculty advisor for Ellipsis. This was a very hands-on class where these students read and discussed hundreds of submissions over the course of one academic year. And each staff member's individual contribution and teamwork is what made this magazine come out into the world. So a round of applause for them, please. I'm also delighted to welcome our guest reader, Brent Amanero. The New York Times columnist John McWhorton recently wrote in an op-ed that one can be massively fulfilled by language one doesn't fully comprehend. I could say that about Brent Amanero's poetry, but it wouldn't be the whole story. While I find his meditative voice and the swerve into the surreal interesting and wonderful, it is the clarity and vividness of images, the precise and unpretentious language, the politically and personally charged material, and the conversational, intimate yet strange voice. It is that which I find truly captivating. In his poem, Rules of the Game, Amanero writes about migrants at the border without sentimentality. Here, boundaries on the field, boundaries between countries and people are marked with sweaters and lunchboxes where children play soccer. And when their ball is kicked onto the other side, they can only yell in hopes that the ball would be returned to them. It is that interplay between the mundane and the profound, the micro and the macro, that gives his poems a voice unique, and unputdownable. Amanero is a musician, a book reviewer, an artist, and a poet who writes in both traditional and digital spaces. We published his poem, How to Move On, in the 2022 edition of Ellipsis. He is the Letras Latinas Poetry Fellow at the University of Notre Dame, and his poetry collection, A Face Out of Clay, is coming out in 2024. I'm so happy and honored to welcome Brent Amanero.
Thank you for that, Ranjan. That was really nice. I don't know where to put my paper. Okay. Instincts. The first thing we learn is how to breathe. Outside on a rooftop bar at night, we don't learn to cry. That comes naturally. In jackets because the gas fireplace isn't working. Purple lights in the trees like they're trying to teach them how to bloom. In the bathroom, keep it together. I wash my hands, smile at myself in the mirror. We assume time is linear, and the mirror becomes a pond. The toilet flushing a river, cosmic anarchy. The man coming out of the stall, a buck. The muffled electronic drums thumping through the walls is a migrating herd, and I am still learning how to breathe. Thank you for having me here. I think we should give another round of applause to the students for all of the work that they did in putting together Ellipses. I'll read some poems, give a little context, try to bring you into my world a little bit. So a few years ago, I was writing a book review on a collection of poems called New Generation African Poets, which is part of a series curated by Kwame Dawes and Chris Abani. In the introduction, Dawes references Toni Morrison's essay, The Origin of Others, and her declaration that movement is the most dominant theme in the 21st century. Chris Abani, discussing movement, quotes Ami Baba, "Identity is not a destination, it's a state of flux." The topic of identity extends beyond the self. Think identity of a country, identity of a race or group of people, the identity of humanity. In this group of poems I'm about to read, I use smaller movements, like driving in a car, as representations of larger movements, like immigration, or moving from one point of identity into the next. This next poem is called Movement Manifesto. A controlled burn of tall, dry, non-native grasses, the field left half-charred. Improvised guitar over a computer-generated rhythm. This highway has been under construction for several years. They took down the sign that had an estimated completion date. When it rains, and everyone talks about the smell. When it rains, brake lights, arpeggio, adagio. All there is to know is right there, and I don't know what to look for. Rule: use everything if you have to, as long as you don't stop. Mexican restaurant in the quaint beach town where everyone pretends they're not millionaires. I want to say gas station because one day there will be no gas stations. Someone will read this and ask, what is a gas station? And the answer will be a place where people would stop so they could keep going. Crescendo. Guideline. Don't put all the flowers in a row. Pretend to be aligned with nature, only to later reveal yourself as working in opposition to it, only to later reveal that you don't understand nature. I believe it's raining all over the world. When it rains at the beach, a newscaster. Rule, the image is worth it, but it's not enough. More rain. Trees have been trying to prove the existence of God for millennia, communicating through fungi. Ghost notes. On the highway, the rain stops, but still all the brake lights. Portable toilets near the construction. Portable toilets by the strawberry fields. This next poem is called Frantic Ghosts. We drove into the velvet desert sky, asleep with our eyes open. The shadowed sagebrush appeared in our headlights like fleeting childhood memories. The glowing road lifted past the headlights into our eyes as each rectangular white line was a page turning in our minds. Clouds curled over the mountain as a young girl warned us of floods on the Texas highway. The little crosses with flowers on the side of the road stopped popping up, replaced by machines methodically drawing the black blood of the earth out. Pockets of fog and rain introduced the dark. A purple cloud flashed above an eternal flame. Everywhere we looked was a new display of paranormal light. The longer we drove under the starless sky, as hundreds of miles of not yet tumbling tumbleweeds turned into city lights, the more we forgot about the mundane daylight, the monotonous routines of everyone in the disappearing cities. One day, this will all return to desert, and all the frantic ghosts vibrating in the oleander, turning branches into bones and leaves into flesh, might finally find peace. I wrote this next poem after this kind of joke that I said and then kind of couldn't let go of, this idea that all stories are a retelling of the Odyssey. And it just like, I said it like in a whim, and then I was like, did someone else say that? And it just kind of stuck with me. And so anyways, I wrote this poem in response to that feeling. All good stories require a journey. I need to get out of this chair. There is no sudden, unexpected joy that could happen. There is, at best, a dull pleasure in everything I do here. My feet are cold. My back is sore. The dog is staring at the wall. The longer I sit here, the harder it is to do anything else. I want to open the blinds, peek out at the wet pavement, imagine how it might smell. You wait patiently for me, to stand, to walk, to do anything. But this chair and this calm are all we have. Stay with me a while longer. Here, where the line turns to a dot, where you and I have this potential pleasure. We don't need the tediousness of adventure. We aren't interested in the crassness of thrill. Still, like a lake in the early morning, gentle breathing. Stay. Throughout my work, I'm interested in exploring my relationship with the earth. I see that exploration as an extension of the exploration of my own identity. So I'm inspired constantly by ceramics and stone carving because that direct relationship with working with the earth. Stone carver Anna Rubinkamp said, Stone carvers are often taught that simply carving something in stone is enough, that the sheer ability to take something that's been cut from the earth and create something beautiful with it is enough. That's something that isn't shared by any other kind of artist. With that in mind, I return to working with ceramics and stone carving from time to time. By no means am I an expert, it's just like this meditative practice. When I work with stone or clay, I can feel the earth as a collaborator, this closeness with time. I'm reminded that I'm forever a student of the earth, and I want to bring some of that into poetry. All the poems I'm reading today, as Ranjan mentioned, are from my debut full-length poetry collection, A Face Out of Clay, which will be published in June 2024 as part of the Mountain West Poetry Series by the Center for Literary Publishing. The title of the book was pulled from the title of this next poem. It's a short poem called Making a Face Out of Clay. This face could have been printed on currency or placed on the end of a spear to warn outsiders. Always start with the tongue. Give it a fold down the middle so the viewer will know it must carry the weight of language. Don't spend too much time on the teeth. The mud is already made of earth, and earth eats everything. Back to the journey concept and the Odyssey, which kind of haunts me, I guess, when I'm writing. It's like it's always there, and I'm like, maybe I can just sit still, but I can't sit still. This next poem is after Young Hae Chang Heavy Industries' digital poem, Dakota, which that poem is based on a close reading of Ezra Pound's Cantos and 1 and first part of 2, which, of course, the part of that is a translation of the Odyssey. So it's this kind of like this lineage within the canon. So this poem is my way of writing Mexico, my family, and myself into the Western literary canon. I spent 2 years of my childhood living in Puebla, Mexico. So these next few poems explore that period of my life. This poem is called Mom is from Wisconsin, Dad is from Mexico, and I Sing. Crammed into the minivan, acid-washed jeans, dachshund, out of the cul-de-sac, we told Dad to play Pearl Jam and stop at McDonald's. Green parakeet, tabby cat, brothers banging knees, hard to tell what or who was howling. Maybe it was the wind, carrying us to where mirage is the same as memory. Mom said, "We're almost there. We're almost there." Semi-trucks, daily commuters, invisible dirt bike rider in the orchards, gas station to gas station. We didn't know paved roads would soon be a thing of the past. Fog to smog, shadows over all the roads, counting county lines until the darkest line on the map, the Mexican border, chewing gum sellers between cars, drowning in honking horns, clouds of dirt blackened the air. As stars flickered out like broken headlights, the night sky was burnt motor oil. Police sirens targeted the California license plates as we shuddered onto the final road, and Mom said, "We're here." Brian and Kent ran upstairs. With my Game Boy in hand, I walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water from the sink, almost took a sip until the smell hit me. I wanted to pray, but hundreds of molted exoskeletons poured out of my mouth, closed my eyes, and dreamed. Warm carpet instead of concrete that felt wet on my bare feet, thick blankets to hide under, dark mud flowed in the gutter, kids out of school, fireworks and grapefruit soda, the parents and the grandparents who stopped keeping count, fingers stained with recent tacos, girls with soft brown skin, men drank empty glass bottles clinking next to the plastic chairs, earned every sip during the 6-day work week. They were everywhere I looked. Their voices confused me, called to my family for more dollars, wrapped bracelets around our wrists, hand-woven, green and red, poured gasoline into their mouths, spewed fire toward God, to the moon, and praised Mom's blue eyes. This poem's called Roots. A caterpillar dug a hole into Mexico's breast, curled into a cocoon, and on December 21st, 1994, it emerged. With the first flap of its wings, cars were covered in a veil of ash. The moth flew down, more ash. It flew and flew until everything, the green soccer fields, the pink cafe, became gray and silent. The only color left was the soft orange glow from a bathroom window, and the only sound was a little boy's voice practicing French in the mirror. Outside of houses made entirely of concrete, the sidewalks were bones and the roads marrow. Like prop roots on a banyan tree, memories connect. Sparse patches of yellow grass and cacti through a minivan window under the falling ashes of Popocatépetl. They called us Los Americanos on the playground, where truck tires were stacked next to the security guard booth. Overinflated balls burst water fountain pipes, and everyone had cracked teeth and skid knees from playing soccer on the basketball court. The kids at recess knew the word beer, but they didn't understand root. I don't know, after the shaking chandelier and brownouts and volcanic ash and cars without seatbelts and men blowing fire between green lights and all the Spanish words which didn't erase my language but loaded it into a minivan and made it transient, the word home. The volcano that was erupting is erupting again. The ash that turned my tears into cactus milk is soaking into the roots of the Mexican juniper. I heard the roads are paved now, and the little nameless tienditas where we drank soda out of plastic bags and licked chocolate off our chocolate fingers have been bulldozed. I'd like to read a couple poems from a form that I invented called tectonics. For those of you who write, the instructions to create a tectonic poem, start with a prose poem, you duplicate it, so just copy paste, and then whatever words you remove out of the first, you keep in the second. And so it creates this kind of chaotic look on the page and fragmented syntax. So this is tectonics. Pan dulce, salchichas picantes, grocery store, the panaderia y la tortilleria, so small under the shadow of the first American. Food and the tiendita was swallowed in a cloud of dirt, whirled up over buildings, snow-capped volcanoes, up, only seen by the birds. Chiles en nogada, the first American, was built and started to look. The giant gray warehouse, then fast. Restaurant was built where we bought cajeta y mazapan. The whole city disappeared, the dirt roads and spit, vapor, and ash that flew north. I'm going to read one more tectonics poem. This one's also an ekphrastic poem after Frida Kahlo's painting The Two Fridas. It's easy to talk the heart, but it's in a painting or en español. Maybe it's easier to talk about the earth. Tickled, país a país, connected to she, her own hand, crowded with agitated clouds, not about blood or easy to see. It's better in color. Sangre, corazón, the body of her skin. By our movement, how her heart is, her heart holds the deep blue of the sky, runs all the way down. Before I read my last poem, I'd like to thank Ranjan Adiga and Westminster College for inviting me to be here. I'd also like to thank Paula Mendoza for having me in her class earlier this week. Thank you to all the staff and everyone cooking the food and taking out the trash and everything that's involved in this. I think there's sometimes invisible labor that we don't always see or recognize. So I appreciate everyone involved, and I appreciate everyone coming together to celebrate literary art in this way. This final poem was published in Ellipsis Literature and Art. So I appreciate the editors. I don't know if it was this group of editors or it was a different group last year, but thank you to everyone involved, and thank you for selecting this poem. Little context for this poem. I used to teach in a city called Elk Grove in Northern California, mostly farms and rural living. I was a guest teacher, which was like a substitute teacher, and I would build relationships with certain schools. It gave me this opportunity to learn about teaching, about my personal experience going through the K through 12 system, and to reflect on that. And I would go in, and my specialty was kind of someone was out on surgery or out for a long time, and I would take over their class for like a month and then build relationships with those students and with that class. There was one school that stood out. They shared a parking lot with a cemetery. Really loved that school. It just, every time I pulled up to it, it just gave me this weird sense of like awareness of just our mortality and transience and just this, the humanness of it all. Is like this, you know, the circle of life all in one parking lot. So it also brought this awareness to like the little rituals that we have, you know. So there would be these little celebrations for back to school night, but at the same time that felt overshadowed by the constant presence of the dead. So it was just kind of a surreal experience. So this poem is called How to Move On. A cemetery and an elementary school share a parking lot. All around are pastures where cows often appear suddenly from the fog. Always a line of cars around the block, never anyone amongst the tombstones. Yet fresh red roses come and go. There's a sign about uneven terrain near the entrance of the cemetery, and a sign about back to school night in bright green and blue on the other side of the speed bump. Morning dew burns away. Sweaters fall on the playground. Before the bell rings, one kid hides under his seat on the bus. He cries as the bus driver coaxes him down the stairs. Thank you very much. Do I stay here?
Well, we can open it up for Q&A if folks have questions for either our team, this team, or Grant. Yeah.
So I'm curious, for those of you that did work on the staff last year, how would you compare this year's issue to last year? Experience of producing?
So that's just me.
Okay.
But also last year I was not here the first semester because I was studying abroad. But I also worked on it the 2 previous years. Yeah, I mean, the staff has probably been pretty small the last 3 years, so it's definitely, it feels like decision or opinions are always heard by everyone, and the decision is much more of a group decision rather than there maybe being like a hierarchy or something. So I feel like the magazine is made by all of us. We all had a part, large or small, in every page. So, and yeah, I think that's great.
Did all of you who worked on the magazine see or talk about, as the semester, the year went by, a thematic thread, an aesthetic thread, an organizational principle, or anything else that makes this particular collection of literary art fit together as a whole, or is it a sampler? I'd be curious to hear if you have found something.
I might be wrong. I'd be interested in what everyone else has to say, but I don't think we have like talked about or tried to pursue a specific theme or aesthetic in the magazine. I think really we were trying to get a wide range of different mediums, types of work, and like themes. So yeah, I think actually one of our focuses was providing a space for like a wide and diverse array of writers and artists, to be represented in the magazine. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add, or if you think maybe we actually do have a theme. I don't know.
I feel like we all liked the pieces that had very strong authorial voice. Like you could tell it's an independent person for each piece that wrote it, and they're all very different. So I think we liked having the different voices, as Jackie was saying.
Yeah, we try to be as all-inclusive as possible rather than be gatekeeping aesthetically or thematically. If it came down to the wire and if it was a choice between two really good pieces, we would consider the biography of the writer, which normally wasn't sort of full on in our heads as we were reading the pieces, but if it came to that point, we would consider that as well. But other than that, we try to be as diverse, I guess, as possible in terms of representing different kinds of voices, backgrounds, aesthetic choices, and so on.
And in a typical class, what we would do is Ron John would send us a collection of a variety of different types of pieces, and then we would start the class by going one by one through the different pieces and discussing maybe what we really liked about one or what we didn't. We didn't always agree, but we would express our opinions, and then we would ultimately come to the best consensus as a group that we could. However, that's not to say that it was always 100% unanimous. That's kind of going back to what Brooke said about opinions were always able to be heard.
Yeah, and it will be arbitrary sometimes, right? So we're not really looking for a perfect piece. By the way, I did lose sleep a lot because I was reading the slush pile and I just said no gatekeeping, but I was doing a lot of gatekeeping because we get 2,000 submissions every year, which is a lot. Think about that. So every week I was slushing it away from the driveway of these literary pieces, and I would try and distill it down to like 10 pieces per class discussion. And these guys then took it forward and made it fantastic in terms of making the right kinds of choices. I also have a question for the team and one question for Brent, but I want to step back and maybe give other folks a chance to ask or say something before I chime in. Yeah.
I had a question, Brent, about your tectonics poems. They sound a little bit like erasure. When you presented, did you go through both, the one stanza that you had taken out and then reversed? I wasn't sure if I was hearing.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you pointed that out, that it's essentially is a combination of prose poetry and erasure. And like self-erasure, because typically erasure is when you're taking, another text, and so to take your own work and then, take it out. And As far as the process, I think just the natural thing is to go top to bottom, left to right, and to look for moments that will stand out, and then take something out, and then make the edits on the second one, and see what that does down there. But then to have to go back to the second one, because you don't want it to be, complete chaos down here. So then to make edits down there, and then have to make those edits again up at the top. So it starts, I think, at the top with what you would think would be a conventional flow, and then it ends up being this chaotic jumping around.
Ping pong.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like you're playing Battleship with yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, the concept of self-erasure, I think, plays a big part into it, and I don't know, the editing process. We were having a conversation at dinner last night about the difference between the writing process and the editing process, and I think this form kind of really puts that right into your face, because the writing process, for me anyway, I try to always make it I try to not interfere with the creative flow as much as possible. So I try not to think too much when I'm writing. And so the description I usually give is I write with my body and edit with my brain. And so with tectonics, I think it's just very much almost mandatory to do that, because then you're going back and you're having a clip, really consciously one word here, and then make something happen over here. And so it just elevates everything, brings it right to the surface. So.
I was going to say, what I find fascinating is your whole text is there, right? Nothing is actually lost.
Right.
It's just all about how you arrange and present it.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I've got one more question. I'm sorry, there's other people that want to jump in front of me. We got all of it. Okay. In addition to writing your own poems, you're the editor of Ellipsis Debut. I had some experience with slush piles a million years ago. I was an assistant editor for a children's book company in New York, and my job was to open up the mail every day. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about how, as you're working your way through all of those submissions that come in over the transom or through Submittable nowadays, how do you decide what goes in the maybe pile, right? I mean, my practice was always maybes and no's.
Yeah.
And I had to make really fast decisions, right? And so I'm just curious, sort of, it's interesting to hear you edit you write with your body, edit with your mind. How do you read?
Well, I think the first thing in working with any journal is you're never alone in it. I mean, maybe in some instances there are journals where it's just one person doing the whole work, but in all of my experiences, there's been a team of readers, co-editors. It's not always it's not me only reading and only deciding. And so the first thing is to always trust your readers. And so I place a lot of trust in their, there's no point in having them read it first if I don't trust their decision making, right? And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, since you mentioned Submittable, I tend to use their voting system, thumbs down, the maybe hand, and the thumbs up, as a pretty good guide. Is it a definite no? Is it, I need to come back to this and sleep on it and look at it again with fresh eyes? Or is it a definite yes? And I think the definite yeses, they happen, but they're, I think to your point, there's definitely a large maybe pile. And, we had a discussion about this actually in Paula's class about how, not just as an individual, but how as a contemporary group of readers, the literary arts in the 21st century, how do we gauge what is good, what makes a good poem? And because poetry throughout history has had different phases of, to use the word, gatekeeping, and different ways of placing quality into compartmentalizing it. And so one thing that I look for is, first is, quality of the writing, but along with that, probably equal to it, is diversity in voice. And I'll catch myself too, like we had a month where every poem we published was by a man, and I was like, whoops, like like I don't want to do that. Like it's like I want to, and so now we have a whole month where it's all women. So I want to be able to. I can't separate. Maybe I don't know if this is true for everyone, but personally, like I can't separate the content from the creator, and so inevitably, like I'm thinking about whose voice I'm publishing, and who I want to celebrate, who I want to uplift. And so sometimes we'll accept a poem by someone who I can tell maybe doesn't have like the chops, like maybe they didn't have the access to the universities and education that others might have had. But you can also tell like there's some sincerity in their voice, and there's just a genuine quality to what's coming out on the page. And so then I will write to them and ask if they're open to working with me on it. And I'll give them edits and I'll give them notes, and then I'll publish their work, and it might be their first publication. So I'm also interested in that. Like I don't want to just be like, well, only the best of the best, and have this kind of elitist perspective on it. So it's complicated. There's a lot to it, I think, and I don't think, I don't think it's enough to just say I'm measuring quality of writing anymore. I think that's not sufficient in the 21st century. Like we need to do more than that. So.
By the way, one of a really mind-blowing experience for me, this being my first year as the advisor, I got at least 9 handwritten letters from folks incarcerated in different prisons. Further works to be published, and I pile up the letters in my office, and honestly, the quality isn't there yet, but they really want to tell their story, so there's always like a cover letter handwritten, dear sir, madam, I have a story to tell, and you must tell this story. And you don't know what to do with that. And yeah, well, can you tell me what to do with that? I don't know how to get back in touch with those folks. It's just like gathering dust in my office, but I feel like, wow, this is so profound. Like, how did this land on my hands?
I mean, you could have a special folio dedicated just to that. I think that would be a beautiful thing. And then, it wouldn't hurt for if there was maybe one of the student editors that felt strongly about the subject, to have them write, kind of an introduction letter of the reason why you're publishing this folio, and what's important about publishing this work, and what it says about our judicial system. And I think that would be beautiful.
Question, go back to tectonics for a moment. I'm always intrigued by this structure and how it can change words. Words have different meanings when you impose some kind of structure like this. So when you said that this is something I came up with on my own, so I was like, oh, it sounds right up my alley. You also talked about your connection and relationship to working with the earth, so ceramics, with working with stone. So hopefully this question will make sense. When you came up with a structure, were you looking for a structure that somehow modeled the earth, the tectonics? Or was it that you came up with a structure and you said, oh, and this actually sort of aligns, provides a nice metaphor for how it aligns with my relationship with working with the earth?
That's a great question. So I came up with the structure because I was trying to find a way to rattle my own syntax. I wanted to kind of shake myself out of my comfort zone. And it just gave me this opportunity to collage my own writing. And so then that happened. Then I took a packet of these poems and I shared it with a friend, and he looked at them and he said, these all tend to have this thematic quality. Like, you're writing about volcanoes, you're writing about, this rupture, and And then on top of that, there's this kind of fragmented quality. And so he started to help connect those dots for me. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so I think that all happened maybe by chance, that it happened to all be linked together. I happened to be obsessing with this particular theme. And then he actually gave me the idea for the title. So community is important. Yeah, if you bond with certain writers, you should definitely nurture that relationship, because I think being able to share your work with someone that you're comfortable with, and being able to provide feedback to them and receive feedback from them and feel safe in that space is an important thing. So that's how that came to be. Yeah.
We have time for one last question, and can that be my question? I just want to ask the team, so what's your biggest takeaway from the Ellipsis experience? Anyone?
I guess for me, like I want to go into publishing, so this is like a very great experience for me, and just as a creative writer as well, to see it from the side of the person that I would be giving it to, being on that side and seeing that it's not that your piece was bad if it gets rejected. It's just maybe that wasn't where it was supposed to be at that moment. And so, just seeing both sides and being able to keep that with me so I can keep going in the future. And also just being able to make something. I have all 4 copies of all 4 years I've worked on it, and I can be like, I made something, and that's great.
So yeah, to add to that, I'm stealing my answer from something Sadie said when we talked about this before. But I feel like what you said I really connected with, were just like we're a small group of people, and I feel like for the year we've been working on this together, we've successfully created a very respectful environment where we listen to each other's opinions and go forward with the understanding that all of us deeply care about the written word, and everyone has different tastes, but I feel like we did a really good job of coming together and working towards something we can all contribute to, and everyone made certain compromises throughout the process, and I think that was a really valuable experience. And yeah, I've enjoyed working with these people a lot, and with Ranjan too.
Sadie, over to you.
To end? Okay, great. Once more, we would just like to thank Brent for his reading and for coming to Westminster. We'd also like to thank Ranjan for all of his support and help throughout the year. Finally, we want to thank our amazing team for all that they have done, and thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful rest of your day.